The cruelty of his words hung in the air. Mom gasped. Marcus muttered, "Jesus, Dad." Even the twins looked shocked. It was Natalie who broke the silence, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Harrington, with all due respect, that's an incredibly narrow view of what constitutes a legacy. Sarah Harrington was an accomplished architect whose designs will outlive us all. She mentored dozens of young professionals who still speak of her with reverence, and she clearly loved her nephew enough to ensure he would be provided for after her death." She squeezed my hand again. "That sounds like a remarkable legacy to me." Dad turned his glare on her. "You've known my son for what, a few weeks? You don't get to weigh in on family matters." "Don't speak to her that way," I said, my voice low but firm. "Natalie is here because I asked her to be. Because, unlike some people at this table, she respects my autonomy and supports my right to be treated fairly." "This is getting us nowhere," Uncle Jim interjected. "Richard, the fact is, you made a promise to Sarah, and now there's evidence of that promise. Whatever your current feelings about who deserves the house, you have an ethical obligation to honor your word." Dad's face remained obstinate, but I could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He had always cared deeply about his reputation in the family, about being seen as a man of integrity. "What exactly do you want, Alex?" Mom asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I want what Aunt Sarah wanted, for her house to be my house, not just to rent, but to own. I want the property transferred to me as she intended." "And if we refuse?" Dad challenged. I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the line I wasn't sure I could cross. "Then I'll be forced to make this recording public, to share it with the extended family, with your colleagues, with anyone who thinks Richard Harrington is a man who keeps his promises." The threat hung in the air between us. I had never openly defied my father this way, never threatened his carefully cultivated image of family patriarch and moral authority. "You would damage this family's reputation over a house?" he asked incredulously. "No," I said quietly. "You would damage this family's reputation by breaking a deathbed promise to your sister. I would simply be telling the truth." Mom reached out, placing a restraining hand on Dad's arm. "Richard, perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any decisions." "There's nothing to discuss," Dad insisted. "The plans are already in motion. The papers haven't been signed yet," Marcus interrupted. All eyes turned to him in surprise. "I haven't signed anything, Dad. And after hearing that recording," he shook his head, "I can't be part of this. I won't take a house that Aunt Sarah clearly wanted Alex to have." "Marcus," Elena cautioned. "No, Elena, this isn't right, and you know it." Marcus turned to me. "I'm sorry, Alex. I should have stood up for you sooner." The support from my brother sent a wave of relief washing over me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel completely alone in the fight. "This is ridiculous," Dad sputtered. "We're a family. We make decisions together, for the good of everyone." "No," I corrected him gently. "You make decisions, and the rest of us are expected to fall in line. But that ends today. Aunt Sarah's house is mine, morally, if not yet legally, and I'm prepared to fight for it by any means necessary." The dinner was effectively over after that declaration. Mom tried half-heartedly to salvage the evening, but the tension was too thick, the battle lines too clearly drawn. Natalie and I left early, declining dessert and ignoring Mom's pleas to talk things through like adults. As we drove away, I felt simultaneously drained and exhilarated. I had stood my ground, I had spoken my truth, and regardless of the outcome, I would never again allow my family's biased expectations to define my worth. The week that followed was eerily quiet. No calls from my parents, no texts from Marcus. Only my appointment with Ms. Rivera offered any distraction from the waiting game. "This recording is significant," she said, after listening to it twice in her office. "While it doesn't override the legal deed to the property, it does establish that your father made a verbal agreement with your aunt regarding her wishes. In some jurisdictions, that could be enough to create what we call a constructive trust. Essentially, an obligation for your father to use the property for your benefit, as promised." "So I have a legal case?" I asked hopefully. She tempered my enthusiasm with a reality check. "You have a stronger position than before, certainly, but litigation would be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. And family court cases are notoriously unpredictable." She leaned forward. "My advice: use this as leverage for negotiation, not as a nuclear option." "But what if they refuse to negotiate?" "Then we'll cross that bridge. But give them time to process. Your revelation was quite shocking for everyone involved." She was right, of course. The bomb I'd dropped at Sunday dinner had been tactical but traumatic. My family needed time to regroup, to consider their options, to decide whether this was a hill worth dying on. So I waited. And while I waited, life continued. I went to work, designed sustainable spaces, met Natalie for dinners and movies, pretended my world wasn't hanging in precarious balance. It was Wednesday evening when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find my father standing on the porch, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "May I come in?" he asked, none of his usual commanding presence in his voice. I stepped aside, allowing him into Aunt Sarah's, into my living room. He stood awkwardly, looking around as if seeing the space for the first time. "She did good work on this place," he said finally. "The renovation before she got sick. I didn't appreciate it then, but it's very well done." "She had good taste," I agreed cautiously, unsure where this was heading. Dad nodded, then seemed to steel himself. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Sunday. And talking with your mother, with Jim, even with Marcus." I waited, not offering him the easy out of my engagement. "I was wrong," he said simply. The words seemed physically painful for him to articulate. "About the house, about Sarah's wishes, about a lot of things." I remained silent, barely breathing. "The truth is," he continued, "I never really understood Sarah. Her choices, her priorities. We disagreed on nearly everything. But she was my sister, and I did love her." He swallowed hard. "When she was dying, I promised her what she wanted to hear, and I told myself it was a kindness, giving her peace of mind in her final days. But you never intended to keep that promise," I said quietly. He hesitated. I think I convinced myself that circumstances would change, that you would eventually get married, have kids, move to a bigger place, that the promise would become moot because you wouldn't want or need this house anymore. And when that didn't happen, you decided my brother's needs outweighed my aunt's wishes." Dad sighed heavily. "I believed I was making the best decision for the family as a whole, the most efficient allocation of resources." He said the words as if they tasted bitter. "Your mother pointed out that I've been treating the family like one of my business investments, maximizing returns, minimizing risks." It was so perfectly, painfully on point that I almost laughed. "That's exactly what you've been doing." "Well, I've been informed by multiple people this week that family isn't a business." A ghost of a smile flickered across his face. Rather forcefully informed, in your uncle's case. I could imagine. Uncle Jim had always been the more emotionally intelligent of the brothers. So what happens now? I asked, not daring to hope too much. Dad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. These are the deed transfer papers, not to Marcus, but to you. Your mother and I signed them this morning. I stared at the envelope, unable to believe what I was hearing. You're giving me the house? Just like that? Not giving. Returning. It should have been yours all along. Dad placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. I'm honoring my promise to Sarah. Belatedly, but completely. I felt tears stinging my eyes and blinked rapidly to hold them back. Thank you, I managed. Dad looked uncomfortable with my emotion. There's something else we need to discuss, about the family home and the lake house. My heart sank. Had I won the battle only to lose the war? What about them? Your mother and I are revising our estate plan. Again. He cleared his throat. Both properties will be divided equally between you and Marcus when the time comes. No more favoritism based on family status. The relief was so intense, I had to sit down. Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Your aunt was right. Family support shouldn't be conditional on following a prescribed life path. He looked around the room again, his gaze landing on a photo of Sarah and me at my college graduation. She'd be proud of you, you know, of how you stood up for yourself, for her wishes. I'd like to think so. An awkward silence fell between us, decades of misunderstanding and miscommunication impossible to bridge in a single conversation. Your young lady, Natalie, she seems like a fine person, Dad said finally. She is. You should bring her to dinner again, under better circumstances. He stood, clearly having reached his emotional disclosure limit for the day. Your mother would like that. We all would. As I showed him to the door, he paused on the threshold. Alex, I want you to know, I am proud of you, of the man you've become, even if I haven't always shown it, even if we don't always see eye to eye. The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. After he left, I sat in the quiet of my living room in my house, and tried to process everything that had happened. The fight wasn't entirely over. Relationships that had been damaged would need time to heal. Trust would need to be rebuilt. But the first, crucial step had been taken. I picked up my phone and called Natalie, eager to share the news. As it rang, I looked around at the walls that had witnessed so much of my life, and now would continue to do so, on my terms. Hey, you, she answered on the third ring. Everything okay? Everything's great, I said, meaning it for the first time in weeks. Actually, everything's better than great. Do you want to come over? I have something to celebrate. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she promised. With champagne. As I waited for her to arrive, I thought about Aunt Sarah, her independence, her determination, her refusal to let others define her worth. And I made a silent promise to honor her legacy by living my life on my own terms, unapologetically. The future stretched before me, full of possibilities I now had the freedom to explore. A house to make truly my own. A relationship with genuine potential. Family bonds that, while tested, had ultimately proven more resilient than I'd feared. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely, authentically seen. Not as a disappointment, not as a failure to launch, not as an incomplete person waiting for a spouse and children to make me whole, just as Alex. and that was more than enough. The housewarming party was in full swing, laughter and conversation spilling from every room of the renovated bungalow. What had once been Aunt Sarah's house, then briefly my parents' house, and now legally and unquestionably my house, had been transformed over the past year. The walls between the kitchen and dining room had come down, creating an open-concept space perfect for entertaining. The dated fixtures had been replaced, the hardwood floors restored to their original glory, the backyard landscaped into a serene retreat. Every change reflected both Sarah's original vision and my own architectural sensibilities, a perfect harmony of past and present. "Alex, these appetizers are amazing," my colleague Diane gushed, helping herself to another stuffed mushroom. "Did you make these?" "I wish I could take credit, but that's all Natalie," I said, glancing across the room to where my girlfriend was deep in conversation with my mother. "She's the culinary genius in this relationship." "Speaking of relationships," Diane lowered her voice conspiratorially, "any big plans you want to share with your favorite coworker?" I laughed, patting my pocket, where a small velvet box had been burning a hole all evening. "You'll just have to wait and see, like everyone else." The past year had been transformative in more ways than just property ownership. My relationship with Natalie had deepened and strengthened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and unwavering support. My parents, true to their word, had made efforts to repair the damage done, treating me as an equal adult rather than a perpetual disappointment, showing genuine interest in my life and choices. Even Marcus and I had found our way back to the easy camaraderie of our childhood, the shadow of parental favoritism no longer hanging over our relationship. His twins now had a standing sleepover date at Uncle Alex's Cool House once a month, an arrangement that benefited everyone involved. "Hey, bro!" Marcus appeared at my elbow, beer in hand. "The place looks incredible. You've really made it your own." "Thanks," I said, genuinely appreciative of his support. "Couldn't have done it without my trusty consultant." I nodded toward Natalie, who caught my eye and smiled warmly. "She's a keeper," Marcus said softly. "Mom and Dad think so too, by the way. They've been singing her praises non-stop since you left last Sunday." "Good to know," I replied, thinking again of the ring in my pocket. "I'm rather fond of her myself." As the evening progressed, I found myself on the back patio, taking a moment of quiet amid the celebration. Dad joined me, 2 glasses of scotch in hand. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering me one. "Hosting duties can be exhausting." "Thanks." I accepted the drink, appreciating the gesture for what it was, an acknowledgement of my role as man of the house, as an equal. We stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Your aunt would love what you've done with the place," Dad said finally. "It has her spirit, but it's undeniably yours too." "That was the goal," I admitted, "to honor her while creating something that reflects who I am now." Dad nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said last year, about how we valued certain choices over others, certain lifestyles over others. Dad, we don't have to rehash all that. No, let me finish. You were right. I had a very narrow view of what success looked like, what happiness looked like." He took a sip of his scotch. "Watching you this past year, how you've built this home, your career, your relationship with Natalie, it's made me realize there are many paths to a fulfilling life. Coming from my father, this was nothing short of revolutionary." "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." "Don't think this means I won't be expecting grandchildren eventually," he added with a wry smile. but the comment lacked the judgment it might have carried a year ago. But on your timeline, not mine. We clinked glasses, a silent acknowledgement of how far we'd come. Later that night, after the last guest had departed, and Natalie and I were cleaning up the remnants of the party, I found myself overwhelmed with gratitude. For Aunt Sarah's foresight, for my own courage in standing up for myself, for the painful but necessary confrontations that had led to healing. "Penny for your thoughts?" Natalie asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind as I rinsed the last of the wine glasses. I turned to face her, taking in her tired smile, the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the curl that always escaped her ponytail. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am, how different things could have been if I hadn't fought for what was rightfully mine." "You didn't just fight for a house," she observed wisely. "You fought for your place in your family, for recognition, for equality." "And for the right to define family on my own terms," I added, thinking of the ring still waiting in my pocket. There would be time for that question later, when we were alone under the stars on the back patio. "Speaking of family," Natalie said, as if reading my thoughts, "your mom mentioned something about brunch tomorrow before they head back. Should we?" "Absolutely," I agreed. "Family brunch it is." As I said the word family, I realized how much my definition of it had evolved. No longer was it just about blood ties or traditional structures or meeting external expectations. It was about connections built on love and respect. It was about creating spaces, physical and emotional, where everyone could thrive as their authentic selves. In fighting for my home, I had discovered something far more valuable: the courage to claim my own path on my own terms, and that was a legacy worth preserving.